Hello everyone, and welcome to Hyperanalyzing LCS, the series where I discuss the biggest moments from the LCS and give attention to the tiniest details that can decide the outcome of a game. This week I will look at some plays from the first round of the 2022 LCS Summer Split Playoffs. FlyQuest got off to a hot start in Game 1 against Team Liquid.
Get some pretty nice value out of that Rift Trail. Mid lane tower being so low.
The play. Vial comes in, Dirk's over the wall, gonna flash for the scoop, but get out of range. Aatrox is here. They gotta have the follow through, right? But Tukui may have sealed his own fate. Health bar's low. His Ignited needs down. Here's 2 for 1 though. Vi still hitting. Core JJ doesn't have an escape. Core JJ's got no way out. Easy. Okay, missed the vault breaker. No. He's red buff slowed. You still got this one. Why?
That's a wasted stopwatch.
Why?
As Team Liquid used the first Rift Herald to get mid lane turret plates, FlyQuest attempts to pick off Bjergsen as he backs away. Although it is a 3v3 in the nearby area, the other 2 FlyQuest players are on the way, so this will turn into a 5v3. Jose Diodo uses Vault Breaker and Flash to get in range to ult Bjergsen. Bjergsen flashes in response to the Vi ult, bringing himself and Jose Diodo to the other side of a wall. However, Tukui is still in range for Shifting Sands and Flash to reach Bjergsen, and he uses Emperor's Divide to push Bjergsen back to the other side of the wall. Additionally, Santorin attempts to use Nimbus Strike to dive onto FlyQuest, but he ends up jumping into the Azure ultimate and gets pushed away with Bjergsen. Since Bjergsen already used Flash, he can't get away from Philip, and Philip takes him down for the first kill of the fight. Santorin uses his clone and Flash to get back onto Tukui. Jose Diodo walks around the wall towards Bjergsen to make sure they get that kill, but this leaves Tukui in a 1v2. Fortunately, this is when the additional FlyQuest players arrive, and Aphromoo enters the fight with a big pulverized Flash combo to knock out both of the remaining TL players. This does not do enough to save Tukui's life, but it does let him get out more damage before he dies and buys time for Jose Diodo to rejoin this side of the fight. When Tukui eventually falls, Jose Diodo charges at Vault Breaker to dash through the wall and briefly stun Core JJ, and his next punch takes out Santorin. This essentially secures the 3-4-1 fight win for FlyQuest, although this chase sequence is pretty bad from both sides as Jose Diodo steps backwards, causing him to miss Vault Breaker, then Core JJ wastes his stopwatch when he is going to die anyway. Regardless, FlyQuest win the early game fight to start off strong in their series against Team Liquid. Team Liquid won big in this extended play in Game 3.
They want to fight now, and Team Liquid do have vision control. Let's see about that Seraphine ult.
Nautilus is a little bit of poke damage only to the front line, but it's a good damage to the Aatrox. Needs the Gore Trigger, heals back up all the way to full, and goes right back to safety, but double flashes down. Bwipo has arrived. The flash in, Bjergsen gets a slow, the pull back, the 1-for-nothing. Team Liquid just burn through the front line.
They gotta wait out the Swain ult. Now they could actually potentially look for a re-engage here. They still have ultis on Tukui and Jose Diodo. Johnson almost has his, so they might try to utilize this super strong Azir to get in there.
Whipple's still gonna mark as well. No flash, no ult, but I mean, he's gonna be safe to jump the wall anyway, so it might not matter a lot. Jose Diodo has to be careful. And there is Spell Shield down, 5k health on the Drake. How does a 5v4 even look? Because Bjergsen running low on mana. In goes the Nautilus. That's Afro. No, it's Jose Diodo gone. Out goes John to the side. The scoop. But does Tukui find anything to kill at all? Fights Core JJ. Needs the shot. Gets a 1. But already the kills are coming through. Team Liquid crushed this fight.
As the dragon spawns, Team Liquid sets up to fight FlyQuest as they approach the river. Core JJ starts the fight with a hook onto Philip, and Depth Charge knocks up both Philip and Jose Diodo. Philip and Jose are kept in place by Hansama with Seraphine's ult and E, plus an additional root from Bjergsen's Swain. Philip survives for a long time with a big Gore Drinker heal, and both he and Jose Diodo are able to flash away into the red buff pit. Bjergsen follows with his own flash and gets just within range to slow Philip with Demon Flare. Another never move from Bjergsen prevents Philip from dashing away and secures the first kill. Team Liquid retreat back toward the dragon, but all 5 of them used their ultimates in the skirmish, and many of them are playing ultimate reliant champions, so FlyQuest feels comfortable to go for the 4v5. Bwipo stays on the backside of the dragon pit while the rest of Team Liquid head into the river. FlyQuest are able to zone Bwipo away as they enter the river themselves. Then Bjergsen hits both Jose Diodo and Tukui with Never Move, pulling them both forward into his Vision of Empire as Core JJ uses Dredgeline to pull Jose Diodo even further towards the rest of TL. Core JJ stays alive with Stopwatch, and the hook secures the kill against Jose Diodo, who falls just as he attempts to dive Hansama with the Vi ult. Additionally, the slow from Bjergsen's Vision of Empire means Tukui is too slow to walk away from Bwipo, who is about to dive in. Just as Bwipo dashes into the river, Tukui opts to use Shifting Sands aggressively to get in position for a big Emperor's Divide. However, his ult is just a tiny bit too early to hit Core JJ, who is still in stasis. Hansama also uses his flash to make sure he won't get hit either, and Bwipo just barely avoids the other side of the Emperor's Divide. The flash from Hansama also gets him further away from Johnson, who does not have the damage to kill Trundle or Swain, and Santorin chases him down, securing the kill with a well-placed pillar. Tukui is able to finally trade a kill back onto Core JJ, but he falls to the rest of Team Liquid, who go on to pick up their 3rd dragon of the game after winning out in this extended play 4 kills to 1. In Game 2 between CLG and Cloud9, CLG won this lengthy teamfight over the Dragon.
The lines are drawn here across the middle of the river. CLG on the left, Cloud9 on the right. Both sides are going to be trading poke here a little bit. I would have to assume Palafox sidesteps Charm, still gets hit by the Q. Now it's Dokla, ready to maybe fight, but Berserker's used the ulti. Berserker trying to get away. CLG jump in, double stasis coming out now. Luger's under pressure. Luger is really trying to kite this one away, but he's shut down as Contract's trying to get out. And CLG finds the kill back onto the Cloud9 AD carry. Dokla wants to heal. He'll stay alive for now. Contract still dealing damage as Jensen's going to be taken out. Can Fudge do it? But they try to get Blabber in, but he's polymorphed, and he falls! Fudge will not be able to 1v3! He steps back! He's kept alive by the Sterix. CLG still hanging around, still hanging out. Fudge, he's behind enemy lines, and he's walking towards the wrong base. Polymorph hits him. Contract's gonna lead the way. Everfrost root strikes true, and there's E2! 8 to Contract!
Both teams are ready to fight over the Infernal Drake. Palafox on Sylas has already stolen the Amumu ultimate and wants to flank C9, but Jensen is looking for him. They run into each other by the blue buff pit, and Palafox just barely sidesteps Charm and is able to back away without taking much damage. As that happens, Contracts finds a great pillar to push Berserker into the Dragon Pit, which starts the fight in the river. Berserker is able to back away with On the Hunt and Flash, but Dokla flashes after him to hit a stun. Sven is able to keep the rest of CLG away from his AD carry by flashing forward and stunning 3 with Curse of the Sad Mummy. Jensen then jumps into the fight with Spirit Rush, prompting Palafox to use Zonya's Hourglass. In the middle of this fight, both Dokla and Sven use their stasis as well, so there are 3 people in the river that are simultaneously in stasis. Meanwhile, Luger wants to take advantage of the stun against Berserker and uses Spark Surge to dash through the Dragon Pit wall past Cloud9's front line. Berserker is able to use the movement speed from On the Hunt to just barely get far enough away to avoid the Zeri ultimate, and Blabber turns his focus to Luger, popping his own ult to lock him down. Fudge follows up and the duo are able to take down Luger while Berserker stays a safe distance away. On the top side of the fight, Contracts chases Jensen away, and when the 3 stasis end, Sven tries to escape up the river, but Contracts and Palafox are able to take him down. Palafox then turns to chase after Berserker, popping his flash and the stolen Amumu ulti, but Berserker is just barely out of range and avoids the stun, while Blabber and Fudge are also barely out of range to the left. However, Palafox does get close enough to dash onto Berserker with Abscond and Kingslayer to get the kill. Poom also flashes towards Berserker and away from Jensen, dodging Jensen's Orb of Deception. With 2 CLG players going towards the bot lane, Dokla gets left in a 1v2 against Blabber and Fudge. Contracts has another great pillar to stop Jensen from joining that group. This lets Dokla buy a lot of time before he goes down, in addition to letting Contracts catch up and do a lot of damage to Jensen. As Dokla finally dies, Palafox rejoins the fight, jumping onto Fudge before turning his attention to Jensen, who he finishes off with Chain Lash for a triple kill. Palafox then backs away towards Poom while Blabber charges at Vault Breaker, but a long-range Glitter Lance greatly slows Blabber's approach. Blabber slowly makes his way closer to Palafox, who turns back towards Fudge, getting a heal with Kingslayer before using Abscond to dash to the side, dodging Blabber's Vault Breaker and Fudge's Infernal Chains. The Infernal Chains still tag Poom, but Polymorph stops Blabber from being able to chase him down, and instead Poom is able to take down Blabber. This leaves Fudge in a 1v3, and he just barely doesn't have enough damage to finish off Palafox before flashing away into the bottom lane. Palafox gets a second use of the Sylas ult in this fight, stealing the Aatrox ult, which he does not get much use out of, but it does give him some extra movement speed to help chase down Fudge. Of the remaining CLG players, 2 have very low health bars. Fudge has a pretty good idea of where they are and is able to land Infernal Chains onto Poom despite not having full vision. However, once again, Poom's Polymorph prevents Fudge from capitalizing on his Infernal Chains, allowing Poom to barely survive. Palafox is able to root Fudge with Everfrost, and the CLG trio have a significant movement speed advantage, so they are able to catch up to Fudge, getting the ace against C9 and claiming the rewards of an Infernal Drake and the Baron buff. Cloud9 won big in this teamfight that ended with Fudge landing a huge slicing Maelstrom.
Exhaust.
All at once.
You exhaust Kennen, you exhaust Nocturne, you exhaust Nautilus, and all of a sudden they're all in there with nowhere to go. They make the engage, and CLG is looking for Jensen, but they don't find him. Now Blabber's ready to try to turn it around. He goes in after Luger. They're going to buy a little bit of time here for Palafox, who goes into the zone, he's keeping himself alive, tries to get back away. CLG still here on the front line, grabbing the kill on Sven. Fudge slices them to pieces. A double kill twice, an 8 for 1.
Both teams start to contest mid lane as the dragon is about to spawn. It is worth noting before the fight starts that 3 CLG players currently have exhaust thanks to Unsealed Spellbook. CLG starts the fight with Dokla hitting Jensen with Glacial Prison. Blabber pops Paranoia to dissuade CLG from chasing further, and Jensen flashes back to safety. As CLG start to back away, Blabber uses the second part of the Nocturne ult to dive onto Luger, who loses half of his health before flashing away and also taking Wild Growth from Poom. Palafox dives towards Jensen and ends up surrounded by C9, a decision that was likely affected by Paranoia's reduced vision radius. Jensen quickly turns away from Palafox, and Sven ends up tanking the charm as he throws out Dredgeline to pull in Palafox. Blabber backs off from the other 4 CLG players and turns towards Palafox, who uses Zhonya's Hourglass to stay alive. Sven then steps forward and uses Depth Charge on Luger to keep the enemy AD carry out of the fight. As he does this, Palafox flashes back towards his team and ends up getting hit by that Depth Charge as well, briefly slowing his escape. Palafox just barely has time to cast Spirit Rush again to dash away from Jensen's Shockwave, which does hit Contracts and Dokla. Just before Shockwave hits, Dokla does use the first of CLG's 3 exhausts on Fudge, who is starting to step forward looking for a big ult. Fudge waits a couple of seconds until the effects of Exhaust are about to wear off before casting Slicing Maelstrom and flashing into the entire enemy team. At this point, both Palafox and Poom burn their exhausts at the same time. Multiple exhausts only refresh the duration. The effects do not stack, so it is still only a 35% damage reduction on Fudge. I believe it is a spectator bug causing the exhaust animation to not appear, so Fudge is actually doing reduced damage with his ult. Regardless, when Fudge flashes in, the entire CLG team is already at half health, so even a reduced damage Slicing Maelstrom is very threatening. Fudge's Slicing Maelstrom also stuns most of CLG's backline, which allows the rest of C9 to close the distance and help finish off the kills. Blabber does flash into Palafox's charm under turret, but Berserker flashes as well to secure the kill. Fudge stuns Luger, which allows C9 to safely take down Luger without diving too deep under the turret, while Blabber gets out of turret range and barely survives thanks to a bunch of Triumph procs towards the end of the fight. Off of Fudge's Slicing Maelstrom, C9 win the fight 5 kills to 1, with Fudge picking up a triple kill, and they claim the Baron buff and the first significant lead of this game. Cloud9 went on to win that game 10 minutes later off of this fight and Baron steal.
Blabber would have to pull off a miracle here. He does have Flash. Smite cooldown coming back up. He's got another charge.
Poom flashes in.
After Jensen, Palafox over the wall gets the charm with this flash, and Luger takes the kill. CLG have now lost their mid laner. Fudge is down for another 20 seconds. CLG is back onto the Baron. Berserker is the only damage threat left on Cloud9 now. Luger's still at half HP.
The charm
CLG
is used.
still
He can
working
go
with
in now.
Baron.
Fudge
Fudge
has teleport.
Teleport and flash whenever he respawns. CLG, how do they want to play it? Sven's walking away
It's up to
now.
Berserker.
They've got the Baron down to 2,000. Blabber's low.
Here comes Fudge.
Again. The Baron's down to 1,000. It's stolen by Blabber. And Cloud9 just turned it all into 10.
Dokla uses Glacial Prison to pick off Fudge in the mid lane, setting up the 5v4 Baron attempt. Most of Cloud9 enter the river from the south, but Jensen is isolated, having pushed the top lane minion wave. Poom first knocks him away with the Blast Cone, then when Jensen tries to walk towards the river again, Poom flashes over the wall to polymorph him. Palafox follows this engage with a Charm Flash combo, and Luger hops over the wall with Spark Surge. They are almost able to kill Jensen before the CC chain ends, but Jensen is able to cast Shockwave and Dissonance before he falls, returning a lot of damage onto Poom and Luger. CLG then turn back to the Baron, now in a 5v3. However, they do have to respect Berserker's damage, and there are moments where Luger or Palafox back away from the Baron to stay safe, which slows down the Baron take and buys time for Fudge to respawn. Additionally, a charm by Palafox gets absorbed by a spell shield from Blabber, and without charm, C9 feel much more confident stepping forward. Sven does miss a Dredgeline, and CLG uses that moment to turn for a fight. Just as Glacial Prison comes off cooldown, Dokla throws it onto Blabber, but Sven keeps Blabber safe with a depth charge that knocks up Contracts and forces Luger to use Stopwatch. In this brief exchange, a few ricochet attacks from Berserker severely injure the entire CLG team. Sven flashes away to stay safe, but this puts Berserker in the front line and he gets hit by a charm from Palafox. However, only Palafox and Poom are close enough to capitalize on the charm, and they are not able to do much damage to Berserker. By the time Luger gets close enough to contribute, the charm has ended and Berserker is able to flash away. Instead, Sven hits Luger with Dredgeline, pulling Luger close enough for Berserker to hit a couple of high damage auto attacks. Although Luger attempts to flash away, he burns down to Sven's Ignite, while Sven survives with Stopwatch. Meanwhile, Blabber flashes into the Baron pit as the Baron drops below 1500 HP. Both junglers smite at 982 HP, but Blabber's smite comes second, so he ends up claiming the Baron for Cloud9. Making things even worse for CLG, Fudge has now respawned and teleports to a good spot near the back of the Baron pit. Fudge flashes into the Baron pit with Slicing Maelstrom, which fully swings the fight in C9's favor, and they pick up 3 more kills without losing anybody. Now with the Baron buff and a 4-1 player advantage, Cloud9 push down mid lane to win the game. Thank you for watching Hyperanalyzing LCS. Hit subscribe and come back next week for my analysis of Week 2 of the LCS Playoffs.